Welcome, my friends, to the SAG-AFTRA Foundation's Conversations at Home program. As you know, I am Sabrina Jalees. Before we are joined by our guest today, I want to let you know that SAG-AFTRA Foundation is a nonprofit organization that relies entirely on donations to provide emergency assistance and free educational programs to SAG-AFTRA artists. This conversation is made possible thanks to the generosity of our supporters. Thank you, supporters. Over the past year, the foundation has given over $6.5 million in COVID relief to more than 7,000 performers. Holy shamoly. So if you are a SAG-AFTRA artist and you need help, please ask. And if you can help, please give. Information can be found in the description of this video. Thank you for your support. Now, without further ado, let's cop on with it. It's my pleasure to introduce just one of the best, Aisling B of This Way Up. Come on in, Aisling.
Here I am, Sabrina, just coming into the Zoom where it happened.
Isn't it really cool though, all jokes aside, would you rather pitch in a Zoom or pitch in a room?
Room, always room. Much as this is a joy to see you in the computer, I secretly hate it because I will enjoy our short box of time together. But when I close my laptop, I will leave not feeling like I can carry any of it with me. Whereas I feel like when I'm in a room with real humans and there's the going into the door and going out of the door and the real eye contact where we can really look at each other in the eyes, that does something to my body that makes me happier. Like we're both stand-ups as well as being starlets. And, you can't do a Zoom gig, really. We kept trying during the pandemic, but ultimately that connection you have with a live audience in a room is unmatched. And I think the same happens with social interactions.
I will say what I like about pitching, auditioning in a Zoom is that all the dialogue is right there. And you might have been fooled into thinking I memorized everything, but it is nice to have all of the notes right there. That's nice for me.
But then isn't fooling what acting is? Just nonstop fooling. Fooled you, constantly thinking.
Actually, well, speaking of fooling, you are such a good fool. You are such a great actor and such a great writer and creator. I want to just start at the beginning. How did you start breaking this show? How did you start? Yeah. And if you want to talk about season 2 specifically, or...
From a writing point of view, well, I'll talk about season 1 and 2 because a lot of people in America maybe haven't watched it yet. Constantly getting referred to as a hidden gem. Nice to be so hidden. Take off the glove, show the gem. I don't mind. But in terms of this show, it kind of came about because myself and Sharon Horgan, who stars in the show with me, we'd been trying to work together for years and we had in bits and bobs. She'd done a show where I played her sister called Dead Boss. That went from pilot, a year later turned into a series. Then the series got cancelled. Then we started working on a movie together. That sort of went nowhere. Then we wrote a TV pilot together. And that after 2 years, they were like, oh no, we've got something similar. And we sold
really,
out.
You need all the burners on and you need to be simmering on like 19 different burners for one.
Yeah. And I think all of us have that, like when people turn into workaholics and they're like, you should slow down. You're like, but I've never been given enough run of years where the proof is that if you slow down or have all of your eggs in one basket, like that will pay off. So I think there's always a fear. And I think that's the same with any freelance job, that if you don't keep moving forward, something could throw you so far back and you'll be out of work or unable to pay your bills or stuff like that. And it's funny that that doesn't totally go away, that need to move forward. And maybe it's because, and you'll know this as well, when you actually do, like I love my job. There's been times, especially this year, where I've really hated the jobs because of COVID and everything that was happening. But my favorite thing to do is the thing. So sometimes it doesn't give you joy, which is really sad, but the thing that still gives you joy is still the thing that you want to work at. So
you gotta like climb a huge mountain to get to the moment of the thing.
Yes.
With like with face shield and 9 COVID tests and
up your bum, up your nose, in your mouth.
Up your nose.
Yeah.
If you do the COVID test in your bum, would you do it in your bum?
Absolutely. Oh my God. Preferable to back of throat, without a doubt.
Well,
Get in
speaking
there.
of COVID, how did you make the decision? I really loved getting to the end of season 2. No spoiler alerts if the gem is still hidden to you, but you've had time. This is for the people that have the gem uncovered. The idea of arriving at sort of like we are about to shut down the world at the end of season 2.
Well, I felt like the theme of the series is like a comedy about loneliness, and it's almost like in a little way it foreshadowed the problems a lot of us would face being cooped up indoors. And in a way, mental health issues or depression is sometimes what COVID feels like. You're unable to leave the house for no reason you can actually see. You're sort of trapped indoors, not connecting properly. And it felt like if I was to write a series 2 and didn't reference what was happening, especially in a city like London, where you're all kind of living on top of each other, it would have felt mad. But I was also writing the show as it was uncovering. And it felt like to deny it was there would be weird, but also to write something without processing it as I was going through it myself, I also couldn't process it. And I think it'll be a while before we work out. Like someone said to me last night, do you remember the phrase flattening the curve? And you're like, oh yeah.
Yes.
That feels like a song from our teenage years.
Yes.
So if you suddenly write a show and start throwing in those things, it could date very, very easily. Yeah. So what I felt like, I was like, oh, everyone knows the first 5 minutes of the pandemic, which was up to March 2020. Everybody sort of can process those first crazy banana bread weeks. So if I move the show up to there, first of all, then it technically is now legally a period drama.
Mm-hmm.
And also,
$1 million from the government for creating a period drama.
Thank you. I'll get half the budget of The Crown now. And because Tobias Menzies is in it, Grace Prince Philip in The Crown, it means I get The Crown's budget. I get one gem.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And it all goes on my ass rejuvenation surgery.
Yes, congratulations. That's what you're in town in LA doing, right?
Thank you. Yes, exactly. I'm so glad you brought it up.
How tall is your bum now?
My bum, I aim to go just above the ankle, but not as long as the foot. So It's still, my legs are still going to be longer than my ass.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to go full ass longer than legs.
Yeah, it's a look. But yeah, so that was the kind of idea with COVID, and to not sort of hit you over the head with it, because that's not how it happened. But I can sort of process as a person 2020, but I can only process as a writer maybe February and March 2020 in the lead up to it, sort of outside of myself. So that's how that kind of came about.
Well, speaking of like just drawing from your life and needing distance from something to write about it, this is based on your experience. Is this based on your experience 10 years ago, 15 years ago? Is it an amalgam of? No,
it's not an autobiographical piece. There are lots of threads in there from my life, but I don't ever try and make it an autobiographical piece. I think I get asked that a lot because I have a sister, I have a dead father and all this stuff.
Like when you create something and you star in it and there's like overlap in your life.
Oh yeah, but it's a total natural question to ask. It'd be like if you had a TV show about a partner and you guys had a baby together. They'd be like, so Sabrina, this, and you'd be like, no, it's not Sabrina, especially if you call it a different character. You allow that to inspire. And I do think like there are so many conversations in the show that other characters have that I've had, or I would love to have had, or things that have been said to me. And that's where taking stuff from life happens. That there might be a breakup that you won't see Anya, my character, have, but you might see a bit of it in Indira Varma and Sharon's characters. Yeah. And there'll be threads that fit. And I remember my friend who's a brilliant UK stand-up, Roisin Connaughey, said that we are storytellers. And there are things that happen in your life that you want to talk about, but not every format is going to be the right one. So sometimes there's that bit in the first episode of series 2, which is me talking about a pile of shit boyfriend, which is the idea that you've got, like, when you're on your own in a bed, you've got a pile of shit on your boyfriend that there's no reason to move. So you sort of, it's a like jumble of detritus from your existence. And it sort of makes a sort of shape there. And every night you get into bed, but there's no one else there to move it for. So it just becomes like in the shape of a person. And that had been stand-up. And generally my stand-up doesn't really work well into scripts because it sounds like I'm doing a bit, but that one did work, I think, anyways. And I was like, oh, that's a rare piece where something from your life that you might have noticed, it can work in a character form, or it can work, but it can be told and it can be shown, because later on I have it with Anya's character and then with Sharon's character, where you see it kind of in the bed. Whereas other times I try to tell something on stage, I'm like, oh no, this would be better shown as a picture. So that's how, in terms of bits being autobiographical, I think then just make a documentary if it has to come from that. But also I think you have to protect your loved ones as well and their stories. And, you know, like everyone who's close to me would recognize bits and bobs. I think that's an important thing, because sometimes there could be things that you would pull out, but it feels a bit like you're pulling a chunky bit of wool from a nice jumper you've put together, a sweater.
Okay, yeah.
You go, oh, that happened, but it didn't actually happen that way. And I think with stand-up, as you know, we get a lot more precious about it being true. Mm-hmm. So with stand-up, I don't like, sometimes you might fudge a thing or mix up two people. So it's like not the partner you had or your ex, you kind of mix it up so they're not recognizable. But you do try and go, no, that really happened. Like there's a contract between you and the audience that the thing you're talking about happened. Whereas what I like about television writing is you can use your stuff to inspire you, but nobody minds if you're like, well, I didn't totally, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's inspired by, I mean, but I guess it just feels so real, and you really like feel connected to the stories in a way that like, I mean, to me, in great storytelling, it is inspired by something real that you felt. And that's why you're able to capture it, whether it's the characters are different or the way it happened is different or the same. I mean, your show just feels very real and grounded.
I think I really like people. And that sounds really silly, but I find the real world like a real TV show. And I love watching reality TV. And some people are like, it's cheap television or whatever. But I'm like, my goal was, when I was making This Way Up, I was like, well, why, rather than get really angry over Real Housewives or whatever, and that it's ruining narrative television, why get angry and why not write something better? Like what people clearly love about watching Real Housewives is watching real relationships. And I know they live in the mansions or whatever, but they're generally always just like having a fight about their friendship, childcare, their partner, a bit of drama in their lives. And we are so engaged by that. Mm-hmm. So translate that to screen, and that's really watchable. And it's the sort of stuff I love watching, as well as real relationships. And if you can make it look better than reality TV, I think that's the goal. So I always wanted to make it feel like you were watching people you know are real conversations. And what you and I know from stand-up is the more nuanced you are with a detail, the more relatable it is to a broader public, which is the weird thing. You know, if you talk about your family in Pakistan or something like that, it's more likely to connect with me in Ireland in a small town than if you just talk about something a bit less specific.
Yes.
So two siblings fighting. I hate seeing in shows massive exposition. Hey sis, you remember when we went down to the lake with our father because we're related and we had an emotional moment? Yeah. I hate seeing that sort of stuff. It's you think you have to do that, but you don't. How you know someone's a sister or a sibling is they walk into the kitchen, open the fridge, grab something without saying anything as they're talking about something else, start eating the food from the fridge. Yeah. How you know what someone's best friend is, they come into the kitchen and they go, yeah. Can I have something to eat? Do you have anything to eat? And I'm like, oh, that's friends. Mm-hmm. And you look at the distance of how people come into a room and what they would do and how many airs and graces they have. And that's how you know. You don't have to do a monologue of remember the time we were down by the river with our dad.
And you didn't get pressured, because I find it's a trope, and it's not hashtag not all executives, but I do find that sort of thing comes from notes. It comes sometimes from people that are outside the story reading it and saying like, hey, we don't trust that our audience is going to understand this. Did you have to push back on that, or were you working with a team?
I think sometimes there's a note and you're like, oh, that's interesting because people didn't pick that up. Mm-hmm. And I think if you're going to you should have someone who reads it, who's on your side, who's not an exec in some way, to make sure I was lucky I have good notes, but if they're always worth listening to because they are an audience member. If they're worried about the audience and you're not, then you're like, probably going to stick to my guns. If they didn't understand something, then they are the audience and you didn't explain it properly. Mm-hmm. But I also think Sharon and I were lucky we got to make like a little kind of teaser pilot at 17 minutes. And I remember when the first commissioners read the script, they were like, oh, do they not like each other? And I was like, no, they love each other. They're obsessed. And they didn't understand the sound of Irish people with each other that like, oh, fuck off, you bitch. Yeah. Is something you'd say if you heard good news. Oh, fuck off, you bitch. Are we going to go together? Like, and that's... Yeah. Whereas when they see it written down, so you have to hear it. And I do think there's a lot to be said, like when you read a script and you know who's attached, an actor, suddenly you hear the voice of it a little bit more so you can see the tone. Yes. So I do think sometimes you might have to explain something more in a script and know that when you go to shoot it, it's done because the costume tells a story. The set design will tell a story. You won't have to say, I'm in my big job, because she'll be at a desk that looks really expensive. So the set design has done that.
My big job.
Here I am at my big, important job. And like, oh, anyone who says that doesn't actually have a big, important job. Yeah. So that's actually a character trait in itself. So yeah, that's how I sort of approach those sort of things. But I go around the world, and I'm sure you do too, like picking up little characteristics of people and how they behave, and they all go in somewhere and then inevitably end up in a person in a script. My big thing from an acting point of view was when I watched Atlanta, I remember thinking, oh my God, there's no actor coming in here for a day that's going to not have something for their show reel. Mm-hmm. I would love that to be the same for my show, because if you pad out your world with fully realized characters, people forget the side characters a lot when they're making things, or to give them some nuance or mess, and it just fills out your whole show when you do that. So I wanted the same, like if I was bringing someone in for a line or two, they'd at least have some bit of meat to eat on the day.
Yeah, well, I feel like your show is sort of a masterclass in how rich it can be to populate your world with the real people in our world. Was that something that you talked about with casting going into it?
Yeah, but I think it has to happen before casting. And I think a lot of the time people write scripts, and when we talk about diversity or what the world looks like, they write a script and then go, so casting wise, we're going to do this now. And it has to start way more in the imagination stage of how you look at the world, because if you start way back, then it won't be a problem down the line, and it'll never be a surprise who gets cast, because you've realized it earlier on.
And was that something that, so as you're writing parts, you're thinking about, oh, this person could play this or this person could play that?
Yeah, if only to hear it with nuance myself as I was writing it. I definitely found it hard when I was writing certain characters. Like season 2 was incredibly difficult to write during COVID, but one thing that was easier was knowing who the people were. So with Kadeep Kerwin, who plays Bradley, my flatmate, or Indira Varma, who plays Charlotte, or Asif Manvi, who plays Vish, who's Sharon's fiance. That was way easier because suddenly I knew where their jokes were. I knew what their strengths were as actors, where their chemistry was. And that became a lot easier. When you don't know someone, you are a bit shooting into the dark, and I find that a bit more tricky. But I also think if you're writing a city like London, it always, bedazzles me when people write somewhere like London and it's a sort of one looking culture. I'm like, what city are you living in? And if you do live in that world, imagine. So I'd hope that it would reflect my reality a little bit, you know.
Cool. And now I'm just realizing I'm talking so much about creating and writing, but from an acting perspective here with SAG-AFTRA. When did you start acting, and like what's been your path to
I've been acting my whole life. I don't mean professionally with union rules, but I mean I was more one of those, like, I've got a lot of patience with difficult children, because I'm like, oh, there with the grace of God go I. I think I might have been one of those. Like, I was a child who just sort of like performed all the time and put on plays in the sitting room. And so it's always been, and it's my favorite place to be. Like, when I'm acting, I'm at home, especially if it's something I like doing. And I love playing with other people. Like, there's no greater joy. I actually remember you talking to me about when you did your big TV show. Excuse me, what's the name of it again?
Carol's Second Act.
Carol's Second Act. Thank you. But I always remember you saying like, oh, wow, it's so fun getting to like learn this craft and getting to be around these people and just like, and I'm like, oh, I still get that. Like, I still feel like I'm getting to play. And I'm much happier when I'm in a scene with someone than when I'm on my own. Like, it's not my dream to be the lead. I like bouncing off someone else. And I love my favorite scenes to kind of write, because I like being in them, is just two people playing around with status where something's getting fixed and they're both trying to use their words to get around it, or you're acting. And I love that. I also think in terms of what I like watching as well, is playing around with how it normally sounds, or the sentence normally sounds. But if you can make it sound like your own, then that's probably the key.
Yeah.
And to not be afraid of, one thing I wanted to make sure was that the characters were funny. Sometimes you see a lot, especially with female characters, you see them be funny to the audience, but not funny to the other people in the scene. And I'm like, I don't really know unfunny people. You're one of my friends. You're hilarious. I have lots of hilarious people in my life. So I don't know a world where people don't go around making each other laugh. So that was important for me as an actor, to try and make Sharon laugh a lot, or we would laugh at each other, because that's what happens more in my own life, definitely.
I just learned I just did a movie with this director, Ali Panku. She wrote it, and Rachel Sennett starred in it, and Rachel's so great at dramatic. And between takes, we would be making each other laugh, and then we were doing this dramatic scene, and Rachel would be like really like stoic and like in it between the takes. And I was like, Rachel's a bitch today. But that was like a big lesson of like, oh, when it came time for me to do my take of this dramatic scene, it was very helpful to stay in the emotion.
Yes. And it's an interesting one to find, when you realize, I think everyone deserves to have their own process, but you do need to let the other actor know what yours is. Because I've definitely been on things before where I've been joking around and I could see it pissed off someone, but they didn't tell me, they just needed a bit of quiet, and I would have been fine with that. And other times, like, I've definitely, when I'm trying to do, especially on This Way Up, because I was doing so many jobs, I was like execing it and writing it and in it and trying to manage the set. And so if I was doing something emotional, or I was supposed to be in a room on my own feeling things, and there was like people running around or lots of noise, I found that incredibly difficult, and often that didn't happen. So it was a real challenge during this shoot to kind of go, guys, and then to have to break out of it and feel like you're being the bad guy, going, guys, can we not just like have whispering? I can hear whispering in the background. Like, I can hear whispering from down the road. And that's very difficult, because you're changing lanes. But then there are other people who I'm amazed by. When I did this show called Quiz, which was based on the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire scandal, which wasn't that big in the US, but it was massive in the UK, where this guy allegedly was answering questions because his wife was coughing as he was sat there. And it was
he deserves the money for having the secret language.
This is my opinion, but it was this big scandal, and it got turned into a TV series, which we did this year. And there's this incredible actor called Mark Bonner, who's a Scottish actor. And we were doing these big kind of like, should we give him the money or not? And I was playing a TV exec. And I thought Mark would be really stoic And I didn't want to get into the same situation where I'd be messing around. So I was trying to like give him his time, and he was doing a Northern Irish accent. So that requires focus. And I was like, oh, by the way, Mark, if you need silence to get into your, zone or whatever, just let me know. And he was like, no, don't. And I had the most fun because we were the sort of people who snap in and snap out for that type of scene. When it's emotional, I do need to find it. But when it's just lines and stuff like that, I can go like in and out.
Kind of like more fun than you're like keeping yourself up. I guess just keeping yourself in the energy of
we had an absolute ball on that. And most of the scenes were sort of ruined because we'd be laughing a bit, not doing bad acting, but it was always kind of like to each other. And that was joyful. We ended the craft. Yeah.
Can I tell you something?
Please, Sabrina, it's just you and me here.
Well, pour me a drink and let me tell you something. One of my favorite parts of the second season or one of my favorite lines is when you say to Etienne's dad, what's Etienne's dad's name? How come I only
Richard.
When you tell Richard that men are always obsessed with seeing women quiet and small and vulnerable, and maybe if you were obsessed with seeing us like fully happy and winning, we'd be doing a lot better. I just think it's like a Taylor Swift song and anthem for women, and like as like a gay comic that has been on more the side of like, if you're funny and a gay and like butch, it's like in the two halves of the whole, it seems like that's been like an attractive thing for me to be
powerhouse. Yeah.
In seeing my like, femme or like just straight female comic friends out there, how intimidating it is been for men. I hate
the word. I'm not sure if you remember that bit of stand-up when we did our comedy specials together. Mm-hmm. That bit of stand-up all about like how men say you're intimidating. Funny women are intimidating. And I'm like, do you know what I find intimidating? The fact that men can kill us with their hands. And my female friends never describe me as intimidating. They describe me as funny, or they're lucky that they get to be around me when I'm making them laugh. I feel like that when you're making me laugh, I feel lucky. I'm never like, Sabrina's so funny. What if it makes me less funny by comparison? It only makes me funnier. And it just upsets me that
it's such a go-to
of myself makes you feel small rather than like makes you get bigger. I know that sounds a bit horny, but it just has always upset me because I didn't grow up. I grew up in sort of like an all-female environment with no men. And so I often find myself like, I know the culture of of just women, of just female environments.
Yes.
And I've always felt especially comfortable especially with gay women and gay female environments or gay male environments where the size of me, which I just can't help, and the size of my personality and how much space and loudness, which I don't see as loud, I see as the sound of me, is just not even noticed. I don't want to be it's just like being a New Yorker in New York rather than a New Yorker in London. So that's definitely sprung from that. And the idea, like in that moment, she's sad, she's grieving, and you're like, oh, this is nice.
Yeah.
And I've had that said to me by numerous partners, and I've had friends who've had it said to them as well. So that's where that sprung from.
Well, you're not going to give it away. Should we be on Richard's side? Will he grow into it? Where's he going? What's the lockdown going to present? I'm excited to see more. I think that we are slowly wrapping up, but before we do, a missing tooth, hemorrhoids. I mean, thank you for giving us this character. Now with a hole in my tooth.
Yeah, I really, I think I wanted to see, there's a shot, I edited the last episode myself, and the first pass of the edit, which I didn't like, had taken out, which I specifically requested, the ass shot from the hemorrhoid scene, like seeing my real ass, obviously the big surgery that I've just had, there on camera. And I wanted it to be presented I wanted a female arse in a scene where it wasn't about sexiness.
Yes.
I actively wanted to see it and for it to be a surprise. And it was really important to me. And it sounds really small, but I wanted it to be like like, it's not that like I wanted to look my ass look bad. I got the makeup artist in there to give it a little bit of just in case, you know.
Let's be real, it had to be sexy in some way.
Let's be real, I took the hammy color off it. Okay, we framed it a little real nice. Okay, let's be real here. It's not a documentary. But I purposely wanted to show my arse in a situation that wasn't sexual and was about like someone sticking a tube up your bum to check it for a hemorrhoid. And it felt like a tiny political act in a way, you know?
Oh, yeah, the words "this way up" and you're sexy but not sexed.
Yeah. Sexy but not sexed.
I truly love you from the bottom of my fart.
Hey, keeping it ass, keeping it real. There's a theme to the whole thing.
Anything that we can keep our eyes open for in the future?
In the future, series 2, please watch it and tell your friends. If you do watch it, I really appreciate people like Sabrina actually posting about it, because these things normally get watched through word of mouth. So I would really love you to watch series 2.
Guess what? When I was rewatching, I saw trending. So hidden gem coming up.
What? Show it. And then obviously Home Alone is on Disney Plus as well. If you want to treat your kids to a little cheeky treat. And then I'm just always watching Sabrina Jalees on Instagram and seeing what she's up to next, what she's filming, movie stuff.
Yes. Your promo is my Instagram, my dream. All right. Well, thank you so much, Aisling B. On behalf of the SAG-AFTRA Foundation, I want to thank you for sharing your experiences, your process, and craft.